Let's do it. Hey, everybody. Hey, thanks for taking another Friday, hopping on with us. Ben and I are going to jump on here for a few minutes. Want to introduce ourselves, tell you a little bit about what's going to be happening today. So my name's Andy Abramson. If I hadn't had a chance to meet you, I'm the founder, director, national director for Elementum, ministry partnering with churches to help them be a catalyst, restore and launch young adults and college students into their kingdom purpose. And so we're excited to be here with my friend Ben Pontius. Ben, want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, I'm the Midwest Regional Director for Elementum. So that's Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Iowa. I'm in Fargo, North Dakota. And it's a nice spring day here. We finally, after, I think I was looking back at photos 2 weeks ago, we didn't get, Minnesota got about 2 inches of snow on Saturday 2 weeks ago. So thankfully that's passed and will not come again for at least 2 months.
2 months. That's great. Yeah. So we want to jump in. We've been doing this over the last several weeks. Is just doing Friday conversations, and it's just a way for us to kind of, as we are talking with college young adult ministry leaders, as we're in the trenches with you guys, trying to navigate different obstacles and hurdles and different things that you're experiencing. Man, it's just a good opportunity for us to kind of take some of the information, the conversations that we're having, and then put them in a context where we can just begin to unpack some of the things we're talking about, because the chances are is there's other of you out there that are experiencing some of these, some of these hurdles, some of these things that you're experiencing. And so it's been fun. We've had different people come on with us to join in these conversations. And so we've been trying to do this every Friday, and we're going to continue to do it, just kind of moving forward, see kind of how it goes moving forward. So anything else on that, Ben, you want to add?
No, just if you're joining in, I noticed we're still going a little bit choppy. So at least the audio is working. If video is choppy, you can, go to another page in your browser and look at cat pictures or something while you listen to our conversation.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Hey, so let's jump into the topic today. And what we want to talk today is actually a conversation that we've been having this week with some of our ministry leaders. And what we're calling it is the 70-20-10 principle. And really it's this idea, or this concept that's been developed over several decades ago. In fact, it was back in the 80s. There was a group of researchers for the Center of Creative Leadership from Greensboro, North Carolina, and they came up with this 70-20-10 principle. And what it really is just how do you best accelerate growth and learning? Like, what does it look like for you to grow and develop? And for us, as we think about discipleship and having some of those conversations, like what does that exactly look like? And so what they did is they came up with this idea of just saying, okay, to help people accelerate in their growth, what needs to happen is 70% of the time really needs to be around experience, right? So it's really kind of being in the trenches, experiencing, trying things, succeeding, failing, like that's kind of a part of the process. Then they said 20% of the time needs to be oriented around feedback loops, conversations, dialogue and discussion around some of those experiences, the community. And then 10% is the information. And here's the thing and we've been talking about this with leaders this week, is I think the problem is that we, in a lot of ways, kind of flip it around, right? We flip it around in terms of like, we prioritize information. And so it really becomes about like trying to convey information and trying to get the knowledge that I have into a leader, or the knowledge that I have into somebody that I'm discipling. And what I see is that we're stuck in a lot of ways. And even you begin to look at the examples of Jesus, right? As he began to like demonstrate to us what disciple making looks like, you look at how many of the different things that he did that were around experience, right? So his disciples were in the trenches experiencing, whether it was the sending out of the 72 or the feeding of the 5,000 or the conversations after they're having a dialogue with the Pharisees off to the side, right? All of those conversations, those experiences were so critical to the disciples' growth, and Jesus knew that. And yet, for some reason, we battle with setting up spaces and opportunities for people to experience that. And I think that we need to begin to move in that direction. So, I'd love to know, even Ben, how have you kind of seen this play out in terms of your ministry?
Yeah, I mean, one comment worth adding on to that is that I think the experience being the best teacher is also significantly more true, increasingly true as you get older. Our brains are more apt to remember stuff that have been learned through experience as we get older. So if you're working with college students and young adults, experience is going to be the best teacher for them significantly. And now I totally blanked on the question that you asked.
Oh, yeah, just experiences that you've had in terms of like, just because you do that really well, right? And just kind of putting people in
Oh, okay.
experiences of, growth.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, one of the big things that we've set up within our local ministry here in Fargo is that in order for you to get to the point where you're leading a community, there's a process that you have to go through leading a smaller group. We call them DNA groups, 3 to 4 people discipling. You have to experience being in that group, then experience taking some time leading that group before you can step into leading a larger context in a community, which for our purposes would be 10 to 20 something people. So I think that experience of one, going through the process of being in a DNA group, then turning around and leading it, and then that it kind of like filters out people who are maybe not interested or willing or capable to take on a higher level of leadership. Whereas usually when we're inviting people into leadership in a more traditional sense, it's kind of like, hey, you have a task that you need to do. And a lot of times we'll give people a position before they've had the experience to prove that they're able to take it and run with it.
Yeah, that's good.
But that's definitely not the norm. So like, what would you say, Andy? What are some of the reasons? What keeps most ministries from operating with the 70-20-10? I think because most people, when you hear that, you're like, oh yeah, of course, obviously experience is going to be the best teacher. But functionally, the vast majority of ministries we work with are not operating that way. And I would say, even like, when you were talking about this principle earlier this week, I was thinking about for Threshing Floor here in Fargo. It's like, man, there's several spots where we need to leverage. We're probably more like, I don't know, 50-40-10
Yeah.
or 50-30-20, or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that there's a few things. I think one is, like, part of it is the system that we've grown up in, right? Like, you even think about just the whole educational system. I mean, we go from kindergarten, sitting in a room, facing a teacher, like having almost like this, even more so when we grew up, or when I grew up, like this one-way conversation where the teacher communicated information, right? So in a lot of ways, I think it's been kind of embedded into us. But I think there's also this sense of like, there's a, I think it's harder to like to measure growth in those things, right? There's like this, it's a lot easier for me to say, check, I did the information, I transferred the information, you're learning this. But I think, and then there needs to be kind of this level of like comfortableness, right, in those conversations, as you begin to kind of figure out what that looks like for your different leaders and the people that you're discipling, is you begin to understand that the example that I used, the difference between, and the analogy I used yesterday in a group coaching call was, are you going to be the sage on the stage, or you going to be the guide on the side, right? The problem is like, when you're the guide on the side, it's you can't plan for things. You don't know what the experience is going to be. You're not quite sure the questions you're going to have to answer. If it's a one-way dialogue and I'm talking to you, Ben, right, I can have my script go through my script and say, check, I've done it. But then if I'm trying to have a conversation with you in terms of dialogue about your experiences, I don't know what questions are coming at me. Like,
Yeah.
and then there's this like intimidation, I think, of like, what if I don't know the answers? What if I, what if I don't know what to do? And so I think that there's just like even some internal things that cause tension in us that don't allow us, make it hard as leaders to begin to implement that shift. But it's interesting, like even yesterday on our group coaching call, like remember the question we asked is, what was the biggest describe the biggest kind of moment of growth in your own life? And we know it as leaders. Like we all went around the group coaching call and said, well, it was when I was doing first ministry and I was in the thick of it and I was being mentored by somebody. And so we know that like theoretically. Then for some reason it's hard to kind of transfer, and make that shift as you begin to move forward.
Yeah, there's a in science there's a term called the liminality. A liminal state is just a state of transition or transformation, where you're not quite, it's where you're between, you're not quite over here, you're not quite over there, you're transitioning between one spot or another. And really, I think if you look at any growth point in your life, whether it be as a leader, in a relationship, the moments where you grow across the board are those times where you're in transition, where things are changing and you have to adapt to something new. The challenge, right, with that is that by default we want to avoid discomfort, and there's always discomfort or fear or risk that comes with stepping out of what is known and stepping into something that's unknown. So, and I think this is, in some ways, it's even more true if you're leading a ministry than it is if you're just a person on the ground participating in ministry, because you have more at stake. You've invested a lot of time in whatever the system is that you're running with. You've invested a lot of energy to get things to where they are. So to change, like for example, if you're in a ministry that where you're 20% experience, I don't do math well, so like 50% teaching and then 10% feedback, there's a lot of risk involved in making those changes.
Yeah. So I'm curious, Ben, like in your kind of opinion, why do you think it's important for leaders to begin to make this shift, right? So if they're a ministry leader listening, why would you propose, say, hey, you need to begin to push towards this 70, even if you're not there, like you said, maybe we're more 50, whatever, but to even begin to move in the direction of this 70-20-10 principle?
I mean, number one, man, for you personally as a leader, it's going to grow you, even if it's uncomfortable, if it's costly. You're going to feel more fulfilled and more energized and more excited about the work that you're doing if you personally are operating under these principles. And the growth that's going to happen for your people is going to be more significant and more lasting. And it's going to take place faster, right? You learn to swim, you learn to share the gospel. Pretty much whatever you do, you're going to learn it much more quickly if you're dropped into the midst of a scenario where you have to figure it out. Not that you go without teaching or without support, right? It would be unhelpful to drop a 2-year-old into a pool and walk away and say good luck. But think for someone who is you as a dad, right? You get in the water with your kid and you help them, walk them through the experience of learning how to swim. You don't just give them a slideshow or an hour-long sermon on here's how you swim and walk through the dynamics of how fluids move around your body and how paddling causes you to
you didn't teach your kids to swim that way?
I mean, I've tried. So, and I feel like that's an obvious example. Of course, you don't just teach a 4-year-old how to ride a bike by giving them a TED talk. But that's exactly what we do for most of our Christian walk is we, do, and whether it's an hour-long sermon or a really hip TED talk style, message that you give that's really engaging, like the transfer of information does not equal transformation.
Yeah, that's good. So what do you think are some of I'd love to, because I got some ideas. What are some of the hurdles you think of getting there? So we were saying, yes, it's important for a ministry leader to begin to move there, but what would you say are some of the kind of major hurdles into that they're going to experience. Just say, these are going to be in front of you if you decide to go in this direction, just beware.
Yeah. Yeah, I think number one of the guys in our coaching call yesterday, he mentioned that his hurdle was a mindset shift.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the number one shift. So first there's your internal mindset shift. And the biggest one that needs to happen for us to move into this, I think, is moving from aiming for comfort to saying what I really want is growth. What I really want, whatever the cost, I'm going to grow. I want to follow Jesus into whatever that is. The second mindset or second shift, I think, is the shift or hurdle, I should say, is that people around you are probably going to resist that. If you have an established ministry and you're moving towards experience, there's going to be people who like the comfort of coming to a service or an event each week and getting the teaching and then feeling good and walking away and doing nothing with it. And if you're moving towards experience, there's going to be people that are going to resist that. Or if you're a church-based ministry and the leadership of the church maybe has a specific view of how the ministry should be run, and if you're changing away from that, that might cause some resistance or negative feedback. So internally, I think that's where you got to begin. Then there's the external stuff.
Yeah, I think even some of the logistical sides of it too, like of being a hurdle of, because in some ways the information one you can do through one person, right? So, but if you have a ministry, let's say you have a ministry, we have a couple, ministries we're working with that have 150, 200 college students. Like, you can't be the sole person where everything now goes through you for feedback, for giving them those experiences, to walk alongside of them. And so you almost got to begin to change the system. And sometimes that can be super uncomfortable to say, yeah, I'm going to be the coach, but now I'm going to teach you to be a coach so you can go and walk alongside people. And people are like, what? I just want to ask questions in a small group. Like, don't give me, and so I think that even logistically, the way that we set up our ministry can sometimes push against this idea, because just the kind of the overall structure of what that looks like.
Yeah. And I mean, along those lines, the growth that happens ultimately is going to accelerate growth for individuals, but the startup time is going to be slower in general, because people it's going to take time to change old habits and move them into new habits, which is what usually happens is you get started down a road and then it gets uncomfortable. And after a while, you don't see the instant results you were hoping for. So you turn around and go back to what was comfortable. When in reality, it's usually after, I was just listening to a book on coaching, and they were talking about how when people start into a coaching relationship, usually it's between week 4 and week 8, where kind of like the excitement of, oh, this new thing wears off. And then it gets to be like, oh, this is actually really hard. Maybe I should stop, which is why a lot of, in this book, at least, they're recommending, if you're going to do coaching for people, you have them commit to at least a 3-month period. So they're locked in, so that they can push past that resistance that takes place a couple of weeks into trying something that's new and maybe a little bit hard.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I think that some of those things that you talked about are important to understand as a ministry leader, that if you move in this direction, even our recommendation to the churches and campuses that we're working alongside is that we need to begin, if we want to see long lasting change, we have to begin to move in this direction, right? But the reality is it's not easy, and there's a lot of reasons we talked about of why that is.
So practical question, let's shift to that for the last chunk of time that we have. What are maybe some initial steps? Say we got someone who's the total opposite. They're 10% experience, 70% is teaching, 20% is maybe a little bit of feedback that they're given to their leadership team.
Yeah, I would say, a couple things you start doing, and that's just a couple off the top of my head. I'd love to hear what you have to say too, is I think that you can begin to think about, just as you begin to talk to your leaders about like the why behind it, right? And as you begin to talk about the why behind it, you can get some kind of initial buy-in of what that looks like. And then as you begin to shift there, because you talked about you're going to hit some of those things in. And as you begin, I think an important conversation even before that is, like walking along and like you said, of equipping other people to begin to do it as well. And so to bring other people with you. And I think that there's can be a level of humility to say to your leaders of saying, hey, I think that we need to shift in this direction. We haven't done a good job of this. And so this is going to be kind of learning for me as well as we
Yeah.
begin to kind of move in this direction and try to figure out what this looks like and realize there's going to be kind of ups and downs in the midst of it. And one of the things even we talked about yesterday on that group coaching call is how important, whether it's your leaders or other ministries that you're doing it with, the environment of other people just kind of holding you accountable, helping kind of walk you through that. Yeah, I'd love to hear what you got in terms of like just practical advice.
Yeah, I think like right there's depending on your personality type, there's the tendency you maybe hear something like this, and if you're on the opposite end of the spectrum of what the ideal is, here talking the 70-20-10, and you're 70% teaching, the tendency maybe is a little like let's just stop everything and flip, and we'll
Yeah.
just kill it and restart. Which there's time for that, but I think in a scenario like this, like if you're a organization or ministry that is really heavy on teaching, leverage what you're already really good at. Probably your people are used to teaching, so begin to point out in your teaching time this principle. Say, look, Jesus is prioritizing experience, and start teaching people that. If that's the way they're used to experiencing ministry, begin there. Then I would say the next thing is for you as a leader to start stepping into those experiences. Like for me, one of the things that I've been realizing haven't done a great job at is leading our crew here in the experience of going out and doing evangelism, for the whole slew of reasons why I think that's less my bent than it should be. So that's somewhere saying, okay, first as a leader, I need to start pushing myself into places where I'm getting those experiences, getting out of my comfort zone, which for me, it looks like I'm going to start inviting other people in to coach me and do that feedback piece, because otherwise it's real easy to just let it slide and stick with what's comfortable. And then I would say, so leverage what you've got, teach it. If you're good at teaching, start there, then start learning yourself. And then I would say, rather than, the tendency, if you're a ministry or event or system heavy organization, is to say, okay, let's do a Sunday school class, or let's launch this new program that is all about experience, which might be helpful, but I think it's better to start with a small group of people and like let it grow from there. Say maybe you got your leadership team and you say, hey guys, the 6 of us, we're going to really lean into experience. And then we're going to turn around and we're going to pass that off, because like you were saying earlier, one person can't walk with 100 people into experience, or even 50, right? Jesus has 72 tops, realistically 12 that he was walking closely with, maybe a few more than that.
Yeah, I was even thinking too, as you're talking, I think there's even some real small tweaks that we can make as leaders as well. I was reading a discipleship book, and they were kind of talking about this integration of experience and conversation of what if you even flip the way that you do things and you sent the teaching ahead of time in a video, and then you said, we're going to have our meeting's going to be conversation, and we want you to do this ahead of time, and then kind of some feedback in the midst of it. I think there's even some practical things you can do to kind of even shift some away from some of the things that you've been doing.
Yeah, I mean, a good example from coaching call yesterday, Matt Moore, one of our partners down in Austin there, what they're doing for their gatherings is their team, the people who are, Christians in their group, they're saying, hey, this week, read this book of the Bible. Then when we come together, rather than Matt teaching for an hour on scripture, he's kind of giving an overview, and then they're spending the majority of their time discussing what questions did you have as you were reading through this on your own. So they're getting the experience of learning to read scripture on their own. They're also getting the experience of asking questions and the experience of dialoguing with people who might have different reviews or disagree or have ideas, and learning through that. So that's a great example of a small one. The other thing I would say on this question of like thinking small shifts is think baby steps, right? If you're a ministry that is not heavy on experience, or for us, like say we're not great at going out and doing street evangelism, rather than saying, all right, guys, we're all going to go out for the next, 8 hours or the next 3 weeks, every time we meet, we're going to go out and do street evangelism. instead start with a tiny step. Say, hey, let's go out and let's prayer walk around downtown. We're not even, you don't have to talk to someone. We're just going to go out there and pray about it, because then you're shifting, you're getting an experience. You're maybe not all the way to the point where you want, if your goal is to get people to be doing evangelism, but you're moving in that direction, and you can continue, and the momentum builds as you take those baby steps.
Awesome. Yeah. We'd encourage you, think about this, 70, 20, 10. How do you begin to push into 70% being experience, 20% being feedback and conversation, 10% being information? And so we'd love, if you have any questions on this, we'd love to jump on a phone call with you. In fact, you can go to elementumresources.com/call, and you can schedule a call with one of our teammates. And we'd love to just kind of talk about where you're at with your ministry, what's going on, and even some practical next steps of what that looks like. So awesome, Ben. Thanks for your time today.
Good stuff, man. We got screaming kids in the background here.
Yes, we do. Welcome.
Real life working from home.
Real life. Okay.
Have a good weekend, y'all.
Okay, we should be off.
That's too bad, Jude. While we were on the call, Jude woke up from his nap about an hour earlier than he should. And so now he's crying, and Mike is screaming because I don't know what happened outside.
So the internet got significantly better.
Yeah, I wonder if it was a issue on the Zoom's end or something.
I don't know. I wonder how choppy it is on the.
The start was pretty. I had the audio off and was watching for a little while.
Yeah.
But
I wonder what the audio is like.
The audio is fine. At least I think there's maybe a little bit of lag, but
yeah, I could tell when I'd ask a question and it would be like 2 or 3 seconds before you hear the end of it.
Yeah.
Cool. Anything we need to touch base on for this week?
I don't think so. Let me just check my calendar and whatnot. No, I'm good to go. Next week, standard stuff. Oh, are we? I know I missed just on Slack. I haven't even looked to see if you responded on there. Are we going to do like staff meeting and stuff next Monday, since it's Memorial Day?
No, let's not do it Monday. I totally forgot that's Memorial Day.
I did too until yesterday when someone mentioned it.
Yeah, I'll send out a message on Slack here today. So a couple pages have you look at some point. I don't know if you saw those. The elementumresources.com/call, which is basically, I set it up to a Calendly link that is a round robin that basically will look at all 3 of our calendars, and whoever has it open we'll get it scheduled. I did prioritize it where it'll go to me first, then you second, and then Steve third. I do want to do some training on strategy sessions and just kind of talk through that, kind of what the goal of those are.
I've never used the round robin function on.
Yeah, it was pretty handy. So you can do it so everybody's equal, right? It'll just kind of keep tabs or whatever, and basically send it to the people, or you can prioritize it by different people, which is really nice. I think so I got those things uploaded on 2/2, so I think we're good on that question on there. And then I did send out that other one on Slack too, just for people signing up for emails on the regional staff page.
Yeah, I saw that.
No, maybe it's all on the all team page. Elementum Resources. Okay, we'll probably just plan on next Tuesday at some point in the afternoon. I need to go in maybe today or on Monday. I'm going to go through and just kind of do some notes, add a couple notes on that. But I think we're getting close to
for the webinar stuff.
For the webinar on Tuesday.
Cool. Yeah, and don't forget, I think there are a couple slides that you can tweak those as needed.
Okay.
I don't remember if I deleted. There might still be just some filler text in there, so
Okay.
add to it or deleted it, whatever.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay. I think
Sweet.
that's it, man. Thanks, Ben.
All right. Have a good
Okay.
weekend.
See ya.